So there's this common misconception that in order to get done faster as a teacher, you have to work harder. But from my personal experience and the experience of the teachers that I coach, that's just not true. Well, today we're going to be talking about how to use classroom routines to leave at contract time. So with that being said, let's dive in.
Hey, teacher bestie. My name's Helena, and I'm the creator of the Present Teacher Podcast. I'm a first year teacher coach, and in this podcast, you are going to learn everything from simple, actionable classroom management, social emotional learning, and teacher wellness strategies. You know that impact you want to make in the classroom? Well, we're going to make it happen here.
Before we dive into what classroom routines you should incorporate into the classroom, let's first get clear on what they are. Classroom routines are the events and the step-by-step sequences you have in the classroom that are habits. These can be in examples of like end of day procedures, when you come in, opening up your day, closing up your day, etc. These are the classroom routines that keep your classroom running and make sure that you and your students are on the same page. So now that we talked about what classroom routines are, let's talk about how you can utilize students to get out faster. The realistic thing is students love to help us. They love being helpers. They love being in charge. They love feeling special. So one thing that I incorporated later into my career, which I wish I would have done sooner, is giving them jobs to help you get out of the door faster. Before, I used to spend hours plugging in Chromebooks, making sure materials were ready, prepping pencils and materials for the next day, etc. But the farther into my teaching career I got, the more I realized that I can actually use students to help me with these things to help me get out on time. So with that being said, let's talk about some classroom routines you can incorporate during the school day to help you leave quicker. So the first classroom routine that I highly recommend you do is an end of day procedure. Now, in general, I like to have these anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. And during this time, there's some things that you can have your students do. An example of this could be computer person puts the computers of the Chromebooks away. That would be a great use of one of your classroom jobs. Maybe you have a board person and this board person is in charge of clearing the board, wiping everything away for the day, and setting up for the next day. Maybe they're in charge of the date. Maybe they're in charge of the schedule cards. These are things that a student can do, especially as you get to those older grades. If you're in the younger grades and you not don't necessarily want them to be writing on the board, you can always do little flip charts to change the date, which make it super easy. Another highly job that I highly recommend you incorporate to this end of day procedure is having a supply person. Have the supply person make sure all the supplies from the day are put away. And maybe when your students come in, they are required to do morning work or centers. Make sure this person has those morning work or centers set up for the following day. Another job that you can incorporate at the end of day procedure is a custodian. Having a custodian to make sure the floor is cleaned, trashes are empty, desks are tidy, and having a picture of what you expect desks to look like can really help that person make sure that the classroom is tidy and ready to go for the end of the day. Another job I highly recommend for the end of day procedure routine is having a pencil sharpener. This person, self-explanatory, sharpens all the pencils and gets them ready for the next day. So now that we talked about an end of day procedure, let's talk about scheduling. When you have a schedule that runs your classroom, it makes things a lot easier. So instead of having a to-do list with 10, 20, 30 things, you can have a classroom routine where you focus on one particular thing on one specific day. An example of this would be my classroom running activities. I've narrowed down all the activities I do as a teacher and narrowed it down to the top things I have to do on a weekly or get to do on a weekly basis to keep my classroom running. And I focus on one of those each day to get me ready for the upcoming week or maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks ahead. So, for example, maybe on Mondays you focus on lesson planning. On Tuesdays, you take those lesson plans you wrote the day before and you get ready for prepping. By prepping your lessons, prepping the materials. Maybe you're sitting at the printer that day, sipping your coffee while you print stuff out. Wednesdays, maybe that's communication day. That's when you make sure your inbox is at zero, catch up on any class dojo messages, make sure your inbox is at zero, and then make sure to reach out to your team, finish any PDs, create a weekly newsletter. This would be the day to do it. On Thursdays, maybe that's your grading day. This is where you collect all the resources, grade them from that week, give them back to students and make sure you input them in the grade book. And then Fridays is a catch-up day. Whatever you didn't get done that day, you then get to make sure that you roll over to the next day, or it's just a personal day where you get to focus on whatever you want. But scheduling these to be done at specific times and preps each day really helps you stay ahead without working and doing 20 to 30 things every single day to then have to redo them the following day. So now that we talked about the two classroom routines I recommend so far, which is the end of day routine and having a schedule for your prep, the third thing I recommend is classroom organization. Now, there's two different organization systems I have and I recommend all my teachers have that I coach. The first one is your paper materials. As teachers, we often print things out and receive things, and sometimes our curriculum has different materials that are printed and hand manipulatives that we're going to need in the upcoming lessons. So I like to organize those. That way, the following year, it's really easy when I'm writing my lesson plans to see which worksheets I have and what supplemental materials I have to use during that lesson. So how I personally organize these is in a filing cabinet, and then depending what grade level and subject you're teaching and or subject you're teaching, there's a couple different ways to do this, but coming from a primary background, a good example of this is doing it by grade level if you teach multiple grades, and then from there, having it by subject, the main core subjects that you teach, and then by the standard or skill. So a great example of this could be second grade math, two-digit addition, and then two-digit subtraction, and then a mix of addition and subtraction. These are both things that are really important and help me see which resources I have for that skill. That'll help me in the upcoming years once I use that resource. And once this is set up, it's pretty easy to file it away. Now, I said that there were two different organization systems I recommend. The second one I recommend are digital materials. Now, it's very tempting to leave everything in your downloads for you to have to search through and spend hours looking for each time you need it. Or you can set up a system that allows you to find things when you need it and make things a lot easier. An example of this could be, like I talked about, the exact same thing with your paper, the same with your digital. You could go by grade level, then by subject, then by skill or standard. An example of this again could be second grade math, um, writing to 100 or writing to 1,000. I'm organizing things that way as I drag and drop activities in there. It's easy to find later as I'm planning, and I don't need to spend hours looking at the resources I ever already have or spending more money on resources that I already have access to. So apart from that, classroom routine. Another one I recommend is having a closing and opening routine. Now, closing and opening routine is the things that you're going to do when you come in the morning, and a closing routine is what you're going to do when you leave in the afternoon. And I'm going to be actually diving deeper into my personal opening and closing routine, but essentially, when you have a routine on what you do when you come in, it helps you start fresh and get ready for the day. And then at the end of the day, when you have your closing out routine, you're doing the same thing every day to close out your day. And it makes getting out the door consistently at the same time and getting ready for the next day super easy. So if you want to learn more, I highly recommend you either subscribe to where you're tuning in from for part 3 of this Leaving Work on Time series, or you can check out my Ultimate Teacher Prep Guide. In that guide, I have actually a start opening time and closing time checklist that I personally create that I use when I come in the mornings and when I leave that allow me to consistently be consistent with being ahead and caught up while still leaving at contract time. So make sure to check that out. Another thing that I highly recommend if you're looking to have a routine to staying ahead and leaving at contract time is to schedule things out. I highly recommend that if you are responding to a family member, that you only respond during contract time, but it can be hard to remember to go back and respond to families and inquiries. So I actually like to schedule out my responses. If I notice that a family member reached out to me, instead of reminding myself later to respond, which I sometimes do, sometimes I'll actually respond while it's fresh in my mind, but I'll schedule out that message to go during the next business hours that I set for myself and my families are aware. That way, I'm still responding and I don't have to worry about forgetting it, but I'm still honoring the boundaries I set for myself in my business hours. Another thing is email responses. Maybe you're getting emails from admin outside of contract hours. You do not have to respond to those right away typically, but I like to still look at them and respond to them while it's fresh in mind. So I will schedule out the response to go as soon as my business hours start or my contract time starts the following day. This can also go for assignments. Maybe you're using things like Google Classroom. Scheduling out your assignments ahead of time can help you plan out and prep weeks ahead without having to worry about finding resources later. They're already good to go. And also reminders. I personally have used Class Dojo as a primary teacher in the past, and I love Class Dojo because I can actually schedule out reminders and events for things coming up when I create the event or when I tell my families about it. That way I don't have to constantly remind them. I let the app do it for me or the system do it for me. So really, I'm reminding families about something coming up while I'm teaching a lesson or I'm leaving for the day. So I highly recommend another routine you incorporate into your classroom is to make sure to schedule out what you can. This allows you to automate your systems, do the work up front, so later you don't have to worry about it. So that wraps up the different classroom routine systems I recommend that you use to leave on contract time. So the first one is the end of the day routine. Second one is the schedule to schedule things out. Third thing is classroom organization. Fourth thing is closing and opening routine for your day. Now, if you're wanting next steps on how you can consistently leave at contract time, I have a couple of recommendations. The first one is to check out my free 3-day event, The Balanced Teacher. This is a 3-day series that I'm doing for free in the community about how you can consistently leave at contract time, have on par, perfect work-life balance while still working ahead. If you want to take it a step further, I definitely recommend you check out the prep guide. In this prep guide, I walk you through the top 10 tips I have on consistently leaving on contract time, and I link to additional podcasts and YouTube videos where I dive into further into these topics if you kind of want one of these videos, for example. That way you're not sifting through my now 130 something videos and podcast episodes. If you want to take it a step further, I would love to have you inside the Present Teacher Circle. This community is where I personally show you step by step all of the systems I use in my classroom to consistently leave at contract time, more than I could possibly cover in a YouTube video or a podcast episode. In there, I talk you through everything I use for classroom management, everything I use for planning and prepping ahead, everything I use for grading and data, everything I use for communication between admin, coworkers, and families, and everything I use to create work-life balance and to set boundaries in the workplace in a way that makes me feel free and empowered instead of guilty. So if you want to check that out, definitely recommend you check out the description. And then also something exciting in fall of 2025, I am releasing my first book. I'm in the process of writing it now, and those inside the community get a special bonus, which is the book club. In the book club, I release a chapter each month of the book. That way, you are the first ones to see it. You can give me feedback. You can tell me what you like, what you didn't like. And then also, as long as you're still in the community when the book releases, I'll actually send you a signed copy, which I'm super excited about. So that's a bonus of the community. So definitely check that out. Another reason why I love the book club is I'm actually taking you through the entire process. Not only am I giving you chapters, I'm telling you how it was writing that chapter for that month, what I did, where I'm at in my writing process, which publishers am I going with, or, which editors, how am I creating my cover, all the things. That way you already know how to write a book if you ever want to do in the future. So super exciting. All right, so that wraps up the secret to leaving at contract time, which is classroom routines that run themselves and help you consistently leave at contract time. So with that being said, thank you so much, Teacher Bestie, for joining me. As always, remember we are stronger together, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I hope that you were able to take away some value that will help you thrive inside and out of the classroom. It would mean the world to me if you could take 5 seconds right now and leave a review on this podcast. And if you found this podcast especially helpful, make sure to take a screenshot of this episode right now and tag me on your socials to let me know you're listening. As always, remember that we are stronger together. With all the love in the world, Helena, aka the President Teacher. See you next time, Teacher Bestie.